you don't have the earlier heter that people once had. Okay, I think I'm going to stop over here, and that gives me a chance next time to do another lecture. We talk about addictive behavior in general, talk about gambling, talk about food addictions, talk about somebody once asked me about addiction to coffee. Can we say that you're not allowed to drink coffee? So we'll let that out as a cliffhanger maybe for next time, and we'll spend a few minutes if we have any questions. Yeah. What's that?
Because to touch on addictive behavior, does that
I'm not sure I can answer that one. I'm going to divulge all the secrets on my next lecture. Oh, we'll see.
All right. Well, let me ask the question, and you'll decide after that. The first time one does it, or when one gets into the habit, that for something that's neged halacha, I could see that that's definitely going to be an isser, and the person has to account for that in heaven. But every time he does it after that, when he can be considered addicted, how is that looked at?
Well, again, I mean, the question is there any 12-step program near you? Are you able to get out of the addiction? Because maybe, and not just maybe, but in fact, why shouldn't the halacha require you to do what it takes if you're able to escape the addiction? Well, we'll have to talk about that coming up. We'll see if there's a distinction there. What's that?
There are, amongst some yeshivot, many individuals who do smoke, young people as well. So if there's since there are no poskim today who would matir this, where are they samech on?
Well, again, I don't know for a fact that there are no poskim on matir it. Again, as I said before, but I don't know of any. As far as what people are samech on, this is a very good question. I think you should get out there and make some phone calls and ask them. I don't know, I mean, I'm not in the habit of defending things which I think are wrong and dangerous, so I can't really speak to that. What's that?
Yeah. An example, we see somebody smoking in front of a shul who may look holier than I do. Is it appropriate for me to say, I would prefer you not to smoke in front of my shul? It gives it is that something we could...
You see, I think you missed I don't know if you missed it, but I don't know if you were there last night at my lecture. I spoke on PZ about the whole idea of how one approaches other people. That's a hard question, you know what I mean? I'm not sure even after listening to the MP3 record of my last night's lecture you'll know the answer. But listen, I mean, basically, there's a question of how you approach people, Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't go, so there's a fine line there about knowing how to approach people. Sure, you want to approach, I think you should, if you're the right person, and if you're, if you'll know how to do it right. I don't know. What's that?
No, I think he was answering. I basically was just going to ask the question of Yashim's logic about, the fact that to smoke in a public area, disagreeing with Ramosha, it would seem that in halacha we talk about that even if someone's cold in the room, you have to close the window. So it just seemed like that.
Right. I don't.
That's the same thing. I don't understand this far.
I don't fully understand Rabbi Yashiv either, to tell you the truth. I partly understand it, but not fully. I think that Rabbi Yashiv actually agrees with the thing you just said. Rabbi Yashiv actually makes mention of himself, as I pointed out. He does say that the Gemara says that a person should not do any behavior which is objectionable to others, and it's unethical. And Rabbi Yashiv applies that to smoking in the proximity of someone else. The one thing he says is, he seems to say, if I understand him right, is that you can't impose on him or force it, because although it's an unethical kind of immoral act, there's no halachic mechanism where the thing is actionable and you can kind of stop him, pull the cigarette from his mouth.
At this point where
okay,
you go to a public place, you can't even go to a public place and smoke anymore, so it's almost like I know in the hospital, you're not allowed to smoke in a hospital. There are specifically designated areas. So I guess if you're one of those designated areas, then you should just, if you're not,
oh, sure,
you stay away. But I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
Did you say actually that Moshe Feinstein said, as a matter of halacha, that you should start actually to smoke because of addiction?
Right. Should not stop.
So if that's the case, it seems like built into Moshe Feinstein's ruling is like a phasing out program where he himself would have eventually switched, not technically switching his opinion, but the facts would have changed as more people listened to him.
Oh, yeah. So that's a very interesting thing. There are people who have pointed that out. In other words, that it comes out that it's now 47 years since, 46 years since the Tshuva was written, right? It's now, I think so, it's now 2010. So arguably, anybody less than the age of 46, or whatever it is, shouldn't be smoking, right? Because unless they were smoking 1 year old, less than 47. No, because how did you start, right? So that's actually an interesting point which has been in fact been made. Unless you're an old person and you were smoking already, you were 25 by the time the tshuva came out, you were smoking already. Yes.
Well, I'd say that I definitely agree that medical knowledge has greatly evolved, even since the 1980s. We're talking almost 30 years now. And the social perceptions on smoking, especially in the Western world, in America and Europe, have significantly changed. The laws of the land have changed. We're no longer, even in Pittsburgh, allowed to smoke in public places. And therefore, do you think there's now a consensus that smoking is in fact prohibited, halachically prohibited, A, and B, does this mean that smokers now have an obligation to quit?
Okay. As far as the consensus, I'll try to use lawyer language here. All the people who have expressed their views in recent years that I know of have said that that it's not allowed. Now, there may be others that have lied low and have not publicized their view and have said that it is allowed. I really can't speak to that. I didn't make phone calls all over the country and the world, so I can't say that it's. I don't know for a fact it's a consensus, but I could tell you that it's a consensus of those who have addressed it in recent years. There's a number of prominent authorities who have addressed it in recent years and have said that nowadays the conditions will be such that you could perhaps prohibit smoking. But the second thing you asked was about, what did you say? I'm sorry, what was the second thing?
Somebody who currently smokes, do they have an obligation to quit? A halachic obligation to quit?
Right, look, so the thing about this, obviously some people are addicted, and not everybody who's addicted. I'm not an expert on addiction, far from it, but it's very hard to quit an addiction. Certainly you don't usually just wave a wand, unless you're one of the world's great strong-willed people. But of course you could try to enter into certain programs that will help you counter that addiction and wean you off of it. And the right thing to do would be, that it seems arguably, let's say according to Shmuel Kamenetsky, you're not allowed to smoke. So it would follow that there's a halachic obligation to make that effort. You got to do what it takes and make that effort and try. And to the extent you can't stop, you can't, but certainly you've got to make that effort. Oh, yes?
How do you define something that's accepted, or just to use
so that's it does not appear that there's any really clearly delineated parameters in the post.
Even if you go aside from smoking, right? So in the Western world, it's more or less accepted today, very much unaccepted. Where third world countries, it's still accepted. So is the rave based on the world or based on the locality? Climbing, I don't know, Mount Everest. Mishpacha just had an article about climbing certain mountains, right? So they're inherently dangerous activities. Mountain climbers do these things, but not everyone's mountain climber.
Well, so you know my feeling. my feeling on the subject. I can't quote chapter and verse to you on this, but I really do feel the answer to your first question is that it should go by the local norms. But as far as the climbers, I'm finding a hard time buying that one. I don't think there's really a society, like a community, it's not like Americans or Middle Easterners, it's not like there's climbers. These people have chosen to enter into that field.
But
now, of course,
choosing a profession is...
No, hold on, say if in fact that's their profession and they make money off of it, arguably we could permit it. Now that's a separate discussion we would have to deal with another time. Because again, like we mentioned briefly earlier, there's actually a permission to engage in certain dangerous acts for your profession. Short of that, I think, just to do it for the fame or something.
So I mean, just according to that, Elon, I forget his last name, the Israeli astronaut.
Ramon.
Yeah.
So he would have been prohibited to go to that extent because of the danger involved?
If you want, I can give you an off-the-cuff answer, but it's worth researching. I have spoken in the past about the question of which professions are asur, because very, very few are. I mean, because you're allowed to enter into danger. I argued, and we probably should do another lecture